Could ibuprofen lead to male infertility? A recent study linked the popular pain medicine to male infertility. But before you swear you're going to suffer through your next headache, we're going to go beyond the headlines. This was published in the journal Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, and this was a study by Danish and French scientists. And they were looking at how ibuprofen might affect adults. And what they found is that testicular tissue exposed to the painkiller made less testosterone, and in some damaged its ability to make sperm. Now, they only tested 31 young men and only over a couple of weeks to see how it affected certain levels of crucial male hormones. They took 600 milligrams of ibuprofen twice a day in the study. And so it's interesting because I don't know that this had been looked at before, and there are a lot of interesting things you could take away from it. My first takeaway was something I've been screaming from the rooftops for years, which is just because something's over the counter doesn't mean you just take it indiscriminately like candy. But as with all things, moderation is best. And if it's really effective for you as a pain reliever, I wouldn't change my behavior based on this, but it highlights interesting things.
And this medication that we've all used falls in that category, non-steroidal anti-inflammatories. It works. I mean, studies show that it may be as effective as opioids in certain situations. So it's a good drug. I mean, this finding is of concern. What it means, we need to do a little more study.
But as a layperson, when you see a study with 31 people, what are you to make of that? Is that something you're supposed to, like,
yes, that we need a bigger study? No, we need a bigger study. But to me, I think it's interesting because as consumers, or even physicians and consumers, you assume that these large companies are doing their due diligence, and infertility is such a big deal. Now, I'm not saying that this study has been validated, but I'm just saying, if hypothetically speaking, if we learn that it does impact someone's fertility, to me, that would be a big deal because we count on them to do research before we actually...
Well, I would hope from a legal standpoint, if there is bigger studies, more studies, they would give a warning, the packaging, the labeling would tell men that if you take this medication, there's the risk of infertility.
Well, and I don't think we're there yet, but I think, again, there's this false notion. I remember in high school, as I was going through, I shot up almost a foot in 1 year, and when I was playing basketball, I was in so much pain. So I would take ibuprofen every single day because it would help with the pain, but I developed an ulcer. And so I learned very early on, you can't just pop these things like candy, and we live in a culture where we do. And we just take more and more and more. And I think you have to be aware of the side effects because there are multiple side effects of anything that you potentially take, whether over the counter or prescription strength. And this is just one more you have to look at. People do tend to forget that these kinds of medicines, these non-steroidals, can be just as effective as opiates. But unfortunately, we went in this trend where everyone was prescribing narcotics instead of when ibuprofen would have been just as effective, where there's really not any addictive potential. We know what's happened with the opiate crisis. So in that regard, I tell you, you look at a study like this, you don't want someone saying, well, I'd rather take the opiates.
Right, and over the counter. Well, but do you think a man, though, should ask their physician if they have some kind of strain or injury where they think they need ibuprofen and they've seen this study? Should they go to their doctor and say, look, I'm concerned, I want to have kids?
Well, this is the first we as physicians are hearing of this. So our comment is going to be like, wow, you know, I haven't heard of this. We need to do more study.
The other physician?
Well, I'm just as good as any other physician.
But to me, this is where I would like the companies to say, no, we know that infertility is a huge deal. We already did that study. We already ruled that out. So this is where I would want the big drug companies to say, we thought of that and we know that that's not a potential, you know, issue.
A maxim in medicine is you take just enough, not too much of anything, right? But ibuprofen, which is an incredibly effective medication, has become so ubiquitous that you have sleeping medicines that just have some ibuprofen thrown into it. It's just there. Yeah. And people don't even know it. They're just taking it when they go to bed at night because they want a good night's sleep. That is a problem in our society. It's become so pervasive that people who don't, you know, you wake up in the morning and you're like, oh, you know, like, I got this little thing here.
Right.
All you really need to do is maybe take a hot shower and shake it out, but a lot of people will take pills when they don't need to, and I think that's where the risk comes into play.
I mean, same thing can be said for acetaminophen, for aspirin. They're added into things, read the labels.
They're everywhere.
And all of these potentially, if you take too many, they can lead to liver problems, ulcers.